sacred, like human. Like one of the most famous phrases that human rights activists use is that it's a man-made law. So we seem to be divided in these binaries of the godless versus the God-fearing, the divine versus the profane. And that's the perspective that our institution and our institution, our team, tries to work on telling that there's more to these things than these two perspectives. So what happens when these perspectives collide? Escalation. I mean, this have you guys seen The Dark Knight, right?
Yes.
Great film, right? And Christopher Nolan talks about one thing, that one of the meta commentary on this is that somehow Batman is creating the Joker. Somehow the escalation that happens because you're so tight on one end with this viewpoint that you create an other. You otherize half of the community. This man over here is not an antagonist. Everyone knows who Mumtaz Qadri is, right?
Yes.
He's not an antagonist. He's not a villain. He's a product of this society, product of discourses that have been here for decades and centuries. So when we don't look into these things with nuances, with academic research investigation, we lose nuance, and what we have is an escalation of binaries and otherization. Us versus them. And that is what conflict management is not about. And antagonizing another perspective because you think yours is right is the wrong way to go about it. And to be fair, the law was passed in its current form in 1991. It's been 30 years of millions and millions of dollars poured into the development sector to try and change the law. One of the reasons nothing happens is because of this bubble. So the human rights organization, and I'm one of them, right? So it's like I'm criticizing myself as well. So the human rights organization has this language and framework that they're not willing to talk out of. So you're talking to a community of people who have an indigenous language, who respects symbols, cultural, religious, traditional, and unless and until you understand that those symbols, those cultural symbols and values are relevant and important to those peoples emotionally as well as intellectually, if you don't respect that, you're not going to get anywhere. 30 years, every time there's been an effort to reform the blasphemy law, more violent instances have occurred. Think about that. You create more violence if you're antagonizing the other in your discourse for change. If you're looking for a personal victory, sure. If you want to sleep at night thinking yourself, oh, I'm a really great guy, I believe in all these great human rights values, that's fine. But if you want to change the discourse, you got to move ahead. So first, you got to do some self-check. Just like a therapist in psychology, to train therapists to do this, before you have a client, you do a self-check. What do I feel? Before I ask this person, how did they feel? Where does your value system come from? So let's say you're a progressive, quote unquote, and you believe that the blasphemy law needs to be changed. Where does that come from? Is it a Eurocentric model of human rights, international human rights? Are you maybe thinking of it because you were born in a home where that's what you were taught? Liberal values, progressive values. The first thing is to be critical of where you are coming from and understanding that that is not the only perspective that is deemed correct. So first, self-check. Second, dialogue, not monologue. If you speak in terms and languages, and I'm not just talking about English or Urdu, right? बात ये नहीं कि उर्दू में बात कर दो, अंग्रेजी में बात कर दो. बात ये है कि frameworks exist करते हैं. If your framework is limited to this alone, or this alone, then you're getting nowhere. There's a fourth circle here, which is the traditional values, which in this case is religious, doesn't matter what it is, religious traditional values of the community. So what you need to do is understand and empathize emotionally, intellectually, what is going on when people say, I will kill you if you offend me in that way. What is going on? Emotionally, what is going on? Cognitively, what is going on? Intellectually, what is going on? Understand those resources. We have gone through dozens and dozens of books of hate speech trying to understand where does it come from. Third, synthesize indigenous resources with contemporary ones. By contemporary, I mean your own, right? So you've got these treaties, international treaties that you're signed with, that an ordinary citizen does not care about. You do a normal survey, you say, do you care that you signed on this human rights treaties? And he'll say, no, I don't even know what that is. You've got the Constitution that people may not know about, and you've got the human rights framework. If you are able to synthesize indigenous cultural symbols, languages, whether that is Ishq Rasool, which is weaponized now. Ishq Rasool means something violent in South Asia, means something peaceful in Turkey. Now think about that. Why? The moment I say Ashq Rasool, you'll have a violent imagery. But when you think about it in Turkey, you're thinking, all those dancing Sufis. What's up with that? Because these are products and derivatives of frameworks and cultural traditions. Lastly, deconstruct and reconstruct. So what I'll do is I'll give you an example, and then I'll show you an animation that demonstrates a new attempt to reconstruct, deconstruct these discourses. Now there's the architect of these blasphemy laws. His name is Advocate Ismail Qureshi, right? He belongs to a political party, Jamaat-e-Islami. This talk is completely apolitical, so I'm just being very objective. So in the 80s, he drafted the law, and in the early 90s, he petitioned for the law to be declared as God's law. And the Federal Sharia Court in 1991 explicitly, for the first time, declared this is now divine. Our law now states this has come from God himself. Had. So that guy's from Jamaat-e-Islami, and my parents are from Jamaat-e-Islami, right? Which is strange, right? So my father sort of knew this guy, and I looked at his book, and it was 5 years ago, after Salman Taseer was shot, and we were looking at a lot of examples. This is one of the most extreme ones. And I looked at his perspective, right? Everyone's got a perspective. And what he's relying on most of the times is tradition. So he's saying this jurist named Ibn Abidin said, any kafir who insults the Prophet will be killed, right? And he cites this. There's a screenshot of that picture. Kafir ko sabo shatam, which is blasphemy, ki wajah se bataur had qatl kiya jayega, right? And I read the original resource, and it said, "Kafir ko sabo shatam ki wajah se bataur had nahi qatl kiya jayega." It said the polar opposite, right? So I called this guy up and I said, "Ki main Jamaat-e-Islami se hoon, like my father is, so I get to say that." And he was like, "Sure, come over." I come there, and he gives me a 2-minute hug. I'm like, it's really awkward because he does not really know what I'm here for, but he thinks I'm this next defender of the law, and he tells me everything. Secrets that he did not want to tell me. I showed him this, and I showed him the resource, the actual resource, and I said, listen, you're basing your petition on something that is factually opposite. The resource you're giving to the court says that non-Muslim will not be killed. He said, sure, it says that I can't read Arabic. I said, you can't read Arabic? Yeah, I can't. But you have cited Arabic texts which don't have translation in the court and given to them to parliamentarians. Yes, I was told to. So okay, so this is the translation done by a mufti. What do you think now? Would you reconsider your position? He said, yeah, sure, but for now, the seculars want to change the law, so let's make sure they don't know. It was literally that fear that there is an other coming over to change Pakistan into something else. And he refused to change his mistake, and there are dozens of them, including the fatwa that was given to kill Salman Taseer himself, which was based on fabricated texts, changing Arabic, printing them. Our It goes beyond what you can imagine, the amount of fabrication that exists. But because the progressive societies and the progressive communities are not willing to look into those frameworks and try and understand what are they drawing authority from, they get away with it. I mean, and Ismail Qureshi continues to get away with it. By the time I was done, he had told me how he had called the prime minister, he called the judiciary, and he rigged the whole judgment. And this is what we need to reconsider on how to do this thing. So I'm going to show you an animation, and as an example, I'm going to give you final words after that. Alt-tab. Yeah. Okay. So I'm going to show you this animation. After this animation I'm going to give you a few words. Pay close attention, especially the top left ones, right? Guys, come on. Give some close attention to this. You might learn a thing or two. The audio is off. Audio?
On the 9th of July 1986, members of the National Assembly under Ziaul Haq's regime met at the Parliament House where they moved to amend the Blasphemy Bill 295C to include the death penalty. There were 6 parliamentarians who primarily debated the inclusion of the death penalty. Maulana Gohar Rahman, Hamza Sahab, Mir Nawaz Marwat Khan, Liaquat Baloch, Begum Nisar Fatima, and Sayyid Shah Turabul Haq Qadri. Our story begins with Maulana Gohar Rahman stating, "The punishment for insulting the Prophet is death, and there is a consensus on the matter." Mir Nawaz Khan, Minister for Justice, proposes the amendment in favor of the death penalty and states, "Whoever defiles the sacred name of the Holy Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, shall be punished with death or imprisonment for life, and shall also be liable to fine." He also used an emotional appeal when he claimed that, "If we reject this bill, let's keep in mind that 250,000 people can surround the Parliament, Mr. Speaker. We will not ignore this threat." Hamza Saab, the lone voice of opposition, interjects to state that the Islamic sources used to justify the death penalty should be verified. He states that, "On the one hand, we are being told that this is a matter of utmost importance, yet we are not doing justice to the issue by passing it so hurriedly. We should consult experts who can help verify and improve the bill." Turab interjects, "We would have sent this for consultation had there been any differing opinions on the matter. In this case, there is an ijma on it." Ijma means consensus or agreement. It is one of the 4 recognized sources of Sunni law, utilized where the Quran and Sunnah are silent on a particular issue. Hamza reiterates, "At least adjourn the session for a little while so that everyone, lawyers, legislators, political and religious experts, can go through the bill and refine it to present its best possible version." Turab al-Haq interrupts again, "Mr. Hamza, there are most certainly no 2 opinions on the matter." To prove the claim of a consensus, ijma, the Parliament repeats its existence throughout the proceedings, justifying the inclusion of the death penalty. There was a unanimous decision. There is no difference of opinion on this. All schools of thought. The entire Muslim community has a consensus on this. There isn't any need for debate. There is a consensus of Islam on this issue. How could you even think of the idea of publicizing this? There is not even one dissenting opinion. There is not even the tiniest bit of dissent on the matter. No one could have any dissent. I could not find a single dissenting opinion. After thorough investigation in all of the madrasas, this cannot be sent for publishing now. The entire Muslim Ummah has a consensus on this. Except for the death sentence, there is nothing else. There are no 2 opinions about this matter. The entire Ummah has a consensus. There are no 2 opinions on the matter. There is a consensus present. It can't be sent for consultation at this point in time. It should not be sent for consultation and should immediately be passed. Our Mr. Hamza needs to change his view. Moreover, Gohar Rahman and Turab al-Haq Qadri provide 5 texts of Islamic law that prove the alleged consensus, ijma, on the death penalty. The Parliament claims that Ibn Taymiyyah in Sarim al-Maslul relates an ijma on killing anyone who insults the Prophet. In reality, this book cites Abu Hanifa as saying that a non-Muslim will not be killed for insulting the Prophet. The Parliament claims that the scholars of Fatawa Alamgiri relate an ijma on awarding the death penalty to anyone who insults the Prophet. In reality, these scholars agree that non-Muslims will not be killed for insulting the Prophet. The Parliament claims that Ibn Abidin relates an ijma on awarding the death penalty to anyone who insults the Prophet. On the contrary, Ibn Abidin says that if the individual in question is a non-Muslim, he will not be killed for insulting the Prophet. The Parliament claims that they have further verified from the madrasas that there is an ijma regarding the death penalty for anyone who insults the Prophet. Inspecting Al-Hidayah, a seminal text on Islamic jurisprudence taught at these madrasas, reveals the polar opposite. It states that insulting the Prophet is disbelief. Since non-Muslims are not killed for their disbelief, they will not be killed for any addition in their disbelief. The Parliament claims that Taqiyuddin Subki in Saif al-Maslul relates an ijma on killing anyone who insults the Prophet. On the contrary, the book cites the Hanafi position. If a non-Muslim insults the Holy Prophet, he will not be punished by death. A non-Muslim is not killed for his disbelief or polytheism. These are bigger sins than insulting the Prophet. Furthermore, Al-Tahawi, a foremost Hanafi scholar, has also clearly stated that if a non-Muslim commits blasphemy, he will be given a verbal warning. If he repeats the offense, he will be punished but not killed. The truth is that every text cited by the Parliament to support claims of consensus on capital punishment for blasphemy reveals a caveat that non-Muslims will not be killed for insulting the Prophet. Therefore, it is safe to say that contrary to what the parliamentarians claimed, this law does not apply to non-Muslims. Ijma, consensus, is a source of Islamic law. The Parliament used ijma as a source of law for the 295C bill. However, we find that this ijma is non-existent for non-Muslims. Does the death penalty then really apply to non-Muslims? Hamza Saab raises two main concerns. One, there needs to be a proper definition of what constitutes blasphemy. Two, people frivolously accuse one another of being ghafirs in order to settle trivial matters. Through thorough debate on the bill, such situations can be avoided. However, Durab accuses Hamza Saab. What you are suggesting is not a process of legislation, but a process of making an atom bomb, and Hamza Saab is once again silenced. And so the motion to pass the bill to include the death penalty was adopted, barring one opposing voice. In a country where it takes months and years to pass the most mundane of laws, it took only a few hours to include the death penalty as a punishment for insulting the Prophet. Can we call this legislative process Islamic? Can we call this legislative process democratic? Is this legislative process not fabricating ijma to silence dissenting voices? Is it not misrepresenting an otherwise rich Islamic tradition? Are these legislators not insulting the very religion that they claim to draw authority from, and the people that they claim to represent?
I've taken a lot of time already, but I hope you guys could see a demonstration of how deconstructing people's frameworks and ideas from their angle can help us come up with a counter discourse that can help change perspectives. There's an Urdu version of it, but there are some people here who don't understand Urdu. That's why I put up the English version. I'm going to finish up with just one thing. This silent minority who threaten us, who makes this all of a sudden there's a tension in this room. The people, they've got guns, but you have words. Guns cannot change perspective. Words can, and you guys can. Thank you.